It's the first time he's mentioned him publicly. He's actually mentioned his name for 6 years. So a lot of people thought, well, this must mean that he's sending out some sort of olive branch. I don't see it like that, I'm afraid. I think the rift between them is as wide as ever.
It has been probably not the post-royal career that they had thought financially. And I think property is a great investment. It seems like they are turning their attention to other avenues of, earning money.
I think we all sort of have our doubts as to whether the marriage will last, for 10, 20, 30 years, but only time will tell.
Hello and welcome to Royal Exclusive. I'm Matt Wilkinson, The Sun's Royal Editor. Joining me in the studio today is news.com.au's Royal reporter Bronte Coy and Royal author Phil Dampier. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Thank you, Matt.
Excellent.
Great
Right.
to be here.
This week, I hope you've been doing the same. I've been watching Prince William's homelessness documentary. It got a little bit of coverage before it came out. We were told what was going to be in it. We got a little sneaky peek, but now it's out. Both shows, absolutely brilliant. I just want to start with you, Phil. There was a lot of coverage suggesting that the fact that William mentions Prince Harry in this documentary, that is some kind of olive branch. What do you agree with that?
I don't, I'm afraid.
Good. Well, let's put that to bed. It's not an olive branch, is it?
Apparently, it's the first time he's mentioned him publicly. He's actually mentioned his name for 6 years. So a lot of people thought, well, this must mean that he's sending out some sort of olive branch. I don't see it like that, I'm afraid. I think the rift between them is as wide as ever. I thought it was a great show, but he couldn't just airbrush him out of history. There were pictures of him with Diana. He was going on about their childhood when Diana took them to various charities. And so he had to mention him. It was as simple as that. But I don't see it as any sort of, major breakthrough, I'm afraid, in their relationship, which is, sadly, as far apart as ever.
Bronte?
I completely agree. It would have been a much bigger story when there are photos of him and Diana and Harry at these homeless shelters. If he hadn't have mentioned Harry, that is the story. So, of course, he had to put him in there.
That would have been a snub, wouldn't it, if he hadn't?
We would have called it a snub.
We would have called it a snub, yeah. So I think that's been exaggerated. But the show itself I thought was great, fascinating, two-parter. It's something that he's really sort of taken to, this homeless thing. I mean, I think he's made a very, very ambitious, rod for his own back, saying he wants to end homelessness. I don't think he's going to be able to do that, but he's going to have a good stab at it. I thought it was a very good programme. Some people saying they were moved to tears by some of the scenes in it where he was meeting homeless people. So it's going down well.
I was one of those people moved to tears,
Oh, really?
I've got to say. I was very moved by it. And something else that I really like about this is as you're watching it, it just felt like you could see all the way through, especially because it begins with the origins of his care about this sector is with Diana. It's that this is so close to his heart and you really get the sense that he knows the people that are involved and he genuinely is throwing his weight behind this. And it just feels like a little bit of a departure from, the many, many engagements we see royals do. It's now he's really getting his hands stuck in and following it through. And as you say, putting a bit of a rod on his back.
He's taking on his mother's legacy, but also, he's going to hand it on to his children.
Yes.
I'm sure it's not a matter of time before he lets George and Charlotte and Louis, sleep rough overnight and get a taste of what he did when he was a kid. So I'm sure that's going to pass on down to them.
We opened discussing whether the mention of Harry was some kind of olive branch. But you mentioned there about he also spoke about Princess Diana and the fact that she would have probably been proud, but also thought that he was a bit mad by taking on this thing. But the way I see the homelessness, please disagree with me if you wish. That this show it's not about Harry, of course. It's not about Princess Diana, but it's very much about Prince William and his own kind of personal drive. I mean, he says. I should be delivering change in my position. And he says that he wants to use his role to help people. It's really a two-part documentary about Prince William and everything that he is actually doing. Forget, that Diana was the inspiration, that was a brief mention of Harry. It's really insightful into what William's actually hoping to achieve the rest of his life.
What he's doing is he's concentrating on a few things and he really wants to make a difference. I mean, the days of having 1,500 patronages, which is what the late Queen and Prince Philip had between them, spreading themselves quite thin. They couldn't possibly sort of take part in all of these things. They've gone. I think they just want to concentrate on a few core issues like the Earthshot Prize, like homelessness, and really make a difference. And that's what he's doing. And initially with this homelessness thing, he's concentrating on, I think it's 5 or 6 centres to try and, these are techniques that have been used in other countries, particularly Finland, I think. And he's going to concentrate on those. And it's a bit like his 5 prizes with the Earthshot Prize. He really wants to sort of concentrate on a few core things and make a difference. And only time will tell if he achieves it. But I think that's what he wants to do. He wants to sort of, make sure that what he actually does counts.
Well, did you think that what we've seen in that 2-part documentary and what we've read of the last year since he's been running this project, do you think that William will succeed? Do you believe that he can end homelessness or find ways to get organisations to end homelessness?
He said 5 years, which is obviously very ambitious. It's a huge problem and multifaceted. But I like the fact that he did, because he's basically saying we're not talking about a wishful thinking one day. Let's actually put ourselves in a position where we have a target, so we have to push really hard to get there. And the other thing that I do respect about this is, of course, as the Royals always do, that the causes that they choose get a lot of scrutiny. And of course, given all the real estate that the Royals have, the discussion of homelessness is a tricky one for them. But that would have been canvassed before he really leaned into all of this. This would have been discussed, I'm sure, by the Palace endlessly. How's this going to look? What are the optics? And I respect the fact that he's still leaning into this. He hasn't shied away from it. I think that he has said, he said he hears the criticism and he still just wants to at least use his platform to try to find solutions. And I respect that part of it as well. The fact that he's
the fact that he's got
leaning
a
in.
lot of homes is not his fault, is it? I mean, that's something which they do have to sort this out, the Royals. They have got too many homes at the moment. I think that's a sort of separate issue. But if he didn't get involved in these things, people would criticise him. But people will criticise him if he does. So you can't really win. There's always someone out there who's willing to criticise. But I think he wants to make a difference. He's using some Duchy of Cornwall land that he's now inherited, of course, to build some houses which he's going to put homeless people in. So he's using that as a practical measure. So I think he really, you can tell by the programmes that he really does care about this issue. And it's not just, it's not just something that he's doing to sort of his own image. He very much is into it. And, I think it's a good thing.
And like you said before, actually, as well, about getting to see this side of William, I think we're learning more about him as a person now at this point in his life than we ever have before through this. Even though it's about homelessness, it's about him.
The other thing is homelessness is a worldwide problem, isn't it? I think this is getting traction in the States as well, getting some coverage. I think it's going out on Disney, isn't it? So people are going to see it there. So, he could well get involved with other projects around the world, I should think. But, but starting off small and seeing if we can build it up.
I'm so glad that this documentary has come out, because I've sat there on these jobs, or stood there on the jobs with a notepad listening to William talking, and sometimes it doesn't come across in the newspaper articles or the short little clips that appear on the television news, kind of how into it, how intelligent he is, how people react, how he reacts when he's being told these kind of stories. So the fact that it's spread out, this documentary, over such a long time, you really get to understand his motivation, why he's doing it and what his kind of aims are. But he also addresses, as you mentioned there, the criticisms. He faces it down in this documentary where he says, well, I understand people are going to criticise me for having lots of houses. You mentioned it earlier, but do you think, either of you think that he can escape this criticism? Is he the right person to end homelessness when he lives in, many houses and has a castle and a palace to use?
Well, we're not in the age of deference with royals anymore, obviously. We've moved into a more modern society with that sort of thinking. And I think it is such a tricky path they have to walk, where they want to show that they can affect positive change, but also not put too much of a spotlight on their privilege. And that's a difficult one. But again, I do respect that he's chosen something that impacts a lot of people, but also that so many people care about. This is an issue people do want to see solved. And I think that the fact that he's leaning into it, and he will receive this criticism, I'm sure, over the years as it continues, he's still said, I've listened. This is something that people care about. This is something I can use my platform for, and he's going to go for it anyway.
I think proof of the pudding is the people he's trying to help. And from that program, look at that program, most of the homeless people seem delighted to see him. I mean, it's wonderful to see him hugging people, the number of people he hugs and kisses and everything else. I mean, it's all very touchy-feely. It all started with Diana, that sort of thing. And he's carrying on. Some people find it a little bit too sort of sentimental, but I think if that's what people want, and he's building up a rapport with these people, then great. If they're happy to see him, then that's good enough for me.
And there was exactly on that. There was a scene in, I think, part one that really kind of spoke to William and Catherine's position with the public, which is, he walked in, I think it was in Sheffield, to the youth centre. And the boys, they're so cool. They're playing basketball. They're hanging out. They're just a bunch of cool teenagers who wear all massive dags too. But there's Prince William walking in his suit. They were so excited. And that's the reach that they have. To get a room full of people like that, it's so exciting. Teenagers are very hard to reach.
It's all classes and all cultures they appeal to.
Yeah,
that is the appeal of the royal family, I think,
Yeah.
that they appeal to people, It's above politics. It's not. I mean, Keir Starmer went into some of these places these days. He probably wouldn't get quite such a nice reception, but William's able to do that.
It's really interesting. That is one of my favourite bits for the bunch of lads. They're playing basketball, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's a be you, but not be you. You know what I mean? So be respectful, but yeah.
That was one of my favourite parts. Yeah. And again, just
their reaction when they heard that William was going to turn up, and it's that the kind of impact that you can have on a topic. There's a second documentary coming out. It's Queen Camilla. I think it's called Her Majesty the Queen Behind Closed Doors, and I've luckily got a viewing this week at the Palace, and it will be out in the next couple of days, I think over the weekend, which is definitely worth a watch. But it's about domestic violence, something that she's been working on, I think it's like 2012, that she's been getting involved in shining a light on domestic violence. She's been getting lots of women together at the Palace. She's done some very good projects on providing toiletries for women after when they're attending domestic violence shelters and stuff like that. But these are two big, now heavy topics that the royals are getting in, and documentaries, which is like almost, well, it feels kind of new that they're actually, screening these big TV shows to highlight what work they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the point I was making a few moments ago about them concentrating on a few core things, I think that's what Queen Camilla's doing as well. She's concentrating on literacy, and she's concentrating on domestic violence. And that, again, is something that she feels she can make a difference. Osteoporosis, obviously, is a cause close to her heart because her mother and her grandmother both died with that. So I think that's what she's doing as well. The days, as I say, of having 700 patronages like the late Queen did, I think they've gone. It's a shame for some of the charities that like to have a royal patron, but I think that the feeling these days is they can actually achieve more if they just concentrate on these issues and actually get quite involved in them.
And also there's been that perception for so long that, when they have all these patronages and they go on so many engagements, that it's sort of, they do what they can, but usually that's turning up, shaking some hands, meeting some people, cutting a ribbon and leaving and going on to the next. And the great thing about these documentaries is, firstly, that they are issues that are so close to the heart of the people, the royals that are involved, so we get to learn a lot more about them through that process. But also, it's showcasing the actual nitty-gritty nuts and bolts work that they're doing. So they're not just showing up for a day or once a month or whatever. They're actually seeing it through. We're seeing the actual physical work that they're doing. And I think that will help change the overall perception of how the royals are approaching their roles. So it's beneficial, I think, in that regard.
On that point, can I be a bit naughty then?
Yes.
Because obviously we've got these two documentaries, William and Queen Camilla. And another royal has been very famous for his documentaries. We had a 6-part Netflix documentary, and we have with Prince Harry, and we have a polo documentary.
Which apparently he's not in very much. Well, apparently Netflix aren't very happy because there's hardly anything of the Prince in it.
Yeah.
Well,
so there we are.
You've got domestic violence, you've got homelessness, and then you've got the famously underfunded sport of polo. So thank God that there's finally a spotlight.
Making documentaries has never really gone well for the royals, particularly Prince Edward when he started making lots of documentaries about his own family. That ended in disaster. So if Harry not to sort of fall into the same trap, I think he needs to rein back. But hopefully we're not going to get any more slagging off the royal family in his documentaries. And if he moves into other things, fair enough. But the polo one, I don't think it's gone down that well.
No, well, he did do an Invictus Games one that he was in briefly
the Invictus Games,
for Netflix, and that's a good cause that he does. But yeah, I'm just trying to get a comparison between the documentaries that we've seen from the Sussexes in California with these documentaries that are coming out this week. I'm probably just being a bit too naughty if I'm drawing a comparison between the two.
You like being naughty, Matt, don't you?
But,
you like causing
I could see it on your face when you brought it up. But what will be interesting is, of course, the first Harry and Meghan Netflix series, given the content of it, and it was the first time we were getting something of exactly that style from them. That obviously had massive cut-through. I will be interested to see, and the real comparison will come, everyone's talking about William's homelessness documentary. This has made huge news, and as you say, around the world. What will be interesting now is a few projects in, and it's no longer focused on them slagging off the royal family, I assume. How many people are going to watch the polo series, but also how much cut-through will it have, even globally? How much will we be talking about it? That's when it'll be really...
Well, I think the next thing we're going to see with Netflix is when she gets over all her trademark problems and various things is American Riviera Orchard, isn't it? I think we're going to see her in the kitchen knocking up some of her favourite pasta dishes or something and pouring out some of her favourite red wine and this, that and the other, and let's see how she does with that. I think that's the next big Netflix project. Whether that will work or not, I have my doubts. But
and as I say, showing off, this wonderful lifestyle you have in California, cooking and going to polo events, compared to two hard-working royals, meeting survivors from domestic violence and meeting people who have been living on the street and actually trying to make a difference. I think the contrast is stark.
Yeah, that is the contrast. Actually, it comes across as they're trying to make money out of it, and instead of doing good deeds, but. That's where we are, isn't it, unfortunately?
Well, let's try and move on from Harry and Meghan for just a little bit. So I've just got back from Australia, your home country, beautiful place, wonderful people. Met some fans of the show, actually, quite a few people.
You've got fans down there?
Of the show, not of me, but of the show generally. And you are part of the show, you are guests, so they're fans of you as well. Sure. But people in Australia really liked the show. They were big fans of the Royals. We did some shows from Australia, but on the final day when we were in Samoa, we did get a briefing from the palace as to what happens now. So they believe that they met all their objectives in Australia. Everything kind of went relatively swimmingly. And we need to talk about what next for the King and Queen, because they've talked about the trip was a tonic for the King. It lifted his spirits because he's had a terrible year with his treatment for cancer. It's been very difficult for him. And that this kind of all systems go for next year. Bearing in mind his cancer treatment is still ongoing. Do you think this is a safe way to carry on with the King and Queen, to say, right, you're after Australia, it all went well, back to normal, go, let's send you to more countries abroad?
Well, I read a small diary piece the other day saying that his doctors were slightly taken aback at this briefing, that he'd actually be able to do a lot more trips. Obviously, it's down to the medical people and how they decide he is. It's the fact that this tour has gone really well, augurs well, you know, that he's obviously well enough. He wasn't well enough to go to New Zealand. The doctors decided he shouldn't go that far. But obviously, places like Canada and Jamaica and the other 13 countries that he's head of state would obviously love a visit. So I'm sure that he will get round to them in time, but they're going to have to take it slowly. They're going to have to pace themselves. I would have thought a trip to the States would be a great thing as well. I mean, whoever gets in. I mean, Trump seems to be very fond of the King. And obviously he'd like to have, you know, that would be enormous if he went to America, if they both went to America. But they've got to pace themselves. It's all dependent on how well he is. But I think obviously the Commonwealth countries and the countries of which he's head of state, they should probably take priority. So I would have thought the next one is Canada, a place that was extremely close to the heart of his parents. I mean, I think Prince Philip went to Canada 75 times during his life, believe it or not. You know, I'm sure that'll be next. He loves Canada as well, so I'm sure that'll probably be the spring or autumn tour next year.
And also, it's not surprising that they have so quickly leaned into letting people know the royals are keen to get out and about, because there were so many reports this year about how difficult the King was finding it, that he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do. He waited so long to be the King. We don't know how long his reign will be as well. That's the reality of someone he's in his 70s, and also because he has been battling cancer. And I can imagine they are so buoyed by this trip that they've been on, because now he can
giving him a lift, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it can lean more into what his mother so famously said, which is they need to be seen to be believed. And he wants to get out there. He has had his wings clipped a lot this year for health reasons. And I'm certain that next year, I think we're going to see a big year for the King with doctors' permission, because he would want to. He would just want to get out there.
How was it, just very briefly, just on Australia, because I was there, I kind of, in my own little bubble, when you were obviously...
Tell us, you were there, we weren't.
You were there watching the coverage back from the UK, and you are Australian. Just very briefly, was I wrong in thinking that it was a success? Because I've been reporting that, the Australians embraced them and it all went well. What's your view?
It was going to be a big test for King Charles, and I really had no idea how it would go. There was a lot of conversation about the Republic since he became the King, and him going to Australia himself was going to be the big test. Are there going to be wide-scale protests? Are people going to greet him warmly? How many people will turn up at the Opera House to see him for that, iconic last day?
They had to lock people out. They couldn't fit everyone in.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think the test was, I think a lot of Australians were actually very surprised at how warmly he was received, and that's the result, isn't it? That's the answer.
From a distance, it looked to me as if it went as well as could be expected.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we had the one protest by Lydia Thorpe, but the parliamentarian who's got a bit of a history for protests. But that's fairly par for the course for her. I think they were probably expecting it. Probably would be surprised if she hadn't done something.
Yeah, I think.
And I think Graham Smith, the Republic guy, was leaping around in the background in his yellow T-shirt or something, saying "Not my king," but he does that over here as well.
I barely saw him.
But nobody saw. But generally speaking, I think it went as well as it possibly could have done. Obviously, we've got this thing hanging over the Commonwealth about reparations, and that's very much something that the government's got to deal with, and the King's got to sort of remain above, I think, because he's not one who's going to be forking out the money. No, I thought it went as well as it possibly could have done.
I agree with that.
Well, let's talk about reparations briefly then, because obviously the trip down under finished in Samoa. This was the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting where the King was there with 56 or 55, 50, including Starmer, so 56 other world leaders. And it's going to be in Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean next year. And the new Secretary-General is Ghanaian. She's replaced Baroness Scotland. And they had a ruling where they said now is the time to talk about reparations. And I believe over the next couple of years leading up to the next CHOGM, this is something that's going to grow and grow and grow and bring the King and the United Kingdom into. And if we're talking about more foreign tours, are there some pitfalls? Are there some places they shouldn't go? What is the danger now that the CHOGM or the Commonwealth countries are going to really start trying to push home this idea that Britain, the King, the government should be paying reparations to countries about slavery. That's what we're talking about, the slave trade.
I think a lot of these countries, sadly, use this as a deflection away from their own domestic problems. I mean, I was very, very disappointed with Barbados, it's a country I've been to many, many times, actually, and they always used to trade on their Britishness, actually, when they wanted to attract tourists. And now, of course, they're sending out a different message. And I thought it was very sad the way they ditched the Queen shortly before her death. I think they could have waited. And, of course, they didn't have a referendum. I mean, who knows what the result would have been had they had a referendum. So I think that was done by a government that was sort of flexing its muscles and deflecting from domestic issues. And I think some of the other countries will be doing this as well. I don't think we should pay reparations. Hopefully Keir Starmer will stand firm. One of the few things I agree with him with when he said he's not going to pay reparations. And it is a government thing. And the idea that we can afford to pay out £18 trillion or something, I don't know where they get these figures from, but is absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's actually quite divisive. And I'm not sure that a lot of the people living in these countries actually agree with their governments for making this such a big issue. I'm sure some of them do, but I'm sure some of them don't. But it's not going to go away. I think you're quite right. I think they're going to carry on with this. But I don't think ultimately we're going to be paying anything, and I think that's the right decision. I think, as the King said in his speech, we need to look forward, and we need to sort of build a better future, and not keep going on about things that happened 200 years ago.
And you touched on it then as well. Sorry, I was just going to say, with the fact that the royal family are effectively diplomats, I mean, they have to sort of go with the script of what the current UK government is also saying. And as you said, the British Prime Minister at the moment has been clear on their intention with that. So he also has to toe the line and stick with that. So there's a lot of responsibility gets put on him. Sort of the optics of it are, why isn't he addressing this or saying this? But the reality is that he has to be in line with what government policy is. And he has, I think the closest he's come to sort of putting some of his own potentially personal feelings into it is, I think, in Kenya last year when he's discussed his greatest sorrow and regret, I think was the phrase, which comes very close to apology-ish adjacent words, but I think that's about as far as it can go.
I think if it was up to him, I think he might pay reparations.
This is the thing.
And I think he might sort of delve into some of the sort of, coffers of, or something in the Royal Collection Trust and sell a couple of paintings or something. I don't know. I think he left to his own devices, he probably would, but I don't think he can make those decisions. That's got to be a government decision. And as you say, Bronte, he's got to toe the line when it comes to the finances. Interestingly,
you mentioned there about the speech in Kenya, and he did one in Ghana as well briefly before. I think he was actually at a place where the slave trips were leaving to the Caribbean. But after in Chogham, after his speech, where you mentioned there about his speech at Chogham, he met Keir Starmer, and he did say. They had a quick greeting and a shake of hands, and he said, "Thanks for your help with the speech." So the King had sent his speech to Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer had, I don't know, put some red lines in or something like that. You can't say that. So that there is this link between the King. He's going to be the figurehead. It's all going to be focused on him. Why didn't the royal family do this? Wasn't the royal family do that? But ultimately, all the flak's going to be thrown at the King, but it's have to come down to the government is what to do.
Yeah, I think he's looked at the Dutch King, who's King Wilhelm. He's made an apology. I'm not quite sure how that's going with reparations from them. So I think he certainly sympathises with it. But I just don't think it's fair that people who are struggling today should pay for the sins of people 200 years ago. And I just don't see. I just can't see beyond that, I'm afraid. And we simply can't afford to pay it. And I think it's much better to move forward and try and help each other within the Commonwealth to do good things and trade and improve people's lives like that, rather than just harking on about the past.
But the conversation will continue. I think the King is so aware of that. But something that I think we've noticed throughout his reign so far is that he does lean into this conversation as much as he can. I think that he references it where he can, and he doesn't seem afraid of shying away from that. And I think, as we have been talking about, given that he is effectively a diplomat, it's if that's what he can do at this time and at least listen and affect change in that way, then I respect that from him as well.
Good. Yeah, but you're interested. It would be good to actually get his on-the-record thoughts on it. But yeah, do you know what I mean? Because he can't talk about it officially because he has to go part through the government.
I want the first draft of his speech before. I want to see that, the one before Keir Starmer.
The one before. Yeah, exactly. Imagine that. I'm travelling again after after Australia and Samoa. I'm going to South Africa, where Prince William is presenting or hosting or holding his 4th Earthshot prize. We mentioned about his homelessness work. in the UK. Earthshot Prize is his global baby, isn't it? They call it his Super Bowl moment, which I'm not too sure what the similarity is there, but it's his global bid to find ways, positive ways, optimistic ways to help save the planet. This year, they're doing their first ever youth leadership programme where they're bringing in lots of youngsters from Africa and Asia and teaching them as well. We mentioned about homelessness, and we've said that this documentary is great. What's your thoughts on this Earthshot Prize? What are you looking forward to in South Africa next week?
Oh, I love the main event, obviously, the awards ceremony and shining a light on this amazing work that's being done. And again, it's so solution-based. Here is a massive global problem. Here is the solutions that we're working towards. Here are the things that are being done. There's a real feeling of hope with that. You know, we all know that the world's in trouble environmentally. And, you know, you watch something like this and you see that work that's being done and the way that the Prince William and his organisation can shine that spotlight. And it's really exciting. And they also present it in such a great way. They've got involvement from really fun and interesting people. I think it's going to be a really great week.
Well, Phil, they're trying to get to Gen Z and young people. Where do you stand on?
I don't know what Gen Z is. That must be Gen A.
They're even younger than me.
That must be the other end.
Well, younger than me.
I think it's great, and because of course Africa doesn't actually produce half as much emissions as we do in the West, and yet they are impacted by all these problems, of course. More than most. So I think it's a very appropriate place to have it there. I think he started this Earthshot Prize after a trip to Namibia in 2018. That's when he was inspired to do it. And as Bronte says, I think the great thing about it is he's really looking to sort of nail down practical solutions, 5 a year, that they each get £1 million prize. And when you see some of the innovative stuff they come up with, it's amazing, isn't it? And to actually make a difference like that, you can identify with it as opposed to sort of when politicians tend to talk in sort of, meaningless platitudes about we must net zero and we must do this, we must do that. This is actually sort of, drilling down and getting some really practical solutions on the ground. And again, I think that's why it works well, So it's looking forward to that. We can't talk about some of it, can we? Because it's embargoed next week, but it's going to be a great 4 days.
Yeah, I think so.
Shame that Catherine can't go to that.
It is a shame, but she didn't go to Singapore. No. So this is like William's project.
Yeah. And I'm sure she would go if she was well, wouldn't she?
Well, I wonder. I mean, she didn't go to Singapore last year, and I think because they maybe want the focus to be on William and his project. Let's be honest, the Princess of Wales turns up. She's not going to, by the way, in case anyone gets excited. She's not going to go to South Africa.
She'd take away from the work to some
From the good work, maybe.
Possibly.
I mean,
there is always, and it just is the nature of the beast. But of course, if she turns up looking extremely glamorous as she always does, it's going to get a lot of column inches that her outfit was amazing, who it's by. That happens. Yeah. That's what happens, and that's why she's so clever, so often reusing outfits to at least minimise that. But even just being there,
you have to reuse. At the awards ceremony, everyone has to wear recycled outfits.
You got
again
yours?
This year.
He's got his.
I'm just going to have to wear this
black
suit
bin liner
because I've worn it 3 times this week. I'll just wear it again next week and claim that's recycled. But it's the whole thing's. I think it's the eco dome they're building is going to be powered by renewable energy. It's really, so it's all going to be very.
And the people they have involved, as I mentioned, people like, to mention an Australian because we love him, Robert Irwin. I mean, he has 6 million followers on Instagram, but he has a global fan base. And it's people like that, William and Catherine have such an amazing ability to just sort of pick the right people to help platform these causes, and it just gets so much more cut through. They exist so much on TikTok, Kate and William do.
I'm showing my age here. I haven't heard of most of these people he's seen.
No, I haven't.
I've heard of Heidi Klum. But that's about it.
Winnie Harlow, there's Billy Porter, he's fantastic.
But no, it's interesting. It's going to be very much focused on getting young people involved and stuff like that. And this is basically what the Royals should be doing. Yeah.
Well, it's their future, isn't it? So it's
exactly.
They're the people doing that.
Now, we've briefly touched on them earlier, but I just want to mention them. Harry and Meghan, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, have been out of the news, have been out of the limelight. I've been away, but they haven't really been in the newspapers or in the news the last couple of weeks. Do you think they were very busy last couple of months? Do you think that they often get criticised for doing things when the other royals are carrying out major tours or carrying out major work? Do you think they have stepped back deliberately the last couple of weeks so that Charles and William can have their moment?
I think she is genuinely probably doing a lot of sort of work in the background for this project with Netflix and this American Riviera Orchard. I think that's the thing that she's focusing on, and I think she's had a few problems with trademark or something, or with the name of the thing, and probably got to go through some legal battles. But I think that's going to be the next thing, and she probably wants to sort of have a bit of a hiatus so that she can really launch that. As for Harry, obviously he's been back and forth with a couple of charities, and they seem to be going their separate ways, don't they? But it's not
Just
bad.
on that, Phil, going their separate ways, business ways.
Going their separate ways.
Always clarifying that.
No evidence that they're splitting up at the moment, personally. I mean, I think we all sort of have our doubts as to whether the marriage will last, for 10, 20, 30 years, but only time will tell. But in terms of their, business and charitable activities, they do seem to be having this policy at the moment of going their separate ways. But it's not a bad thing to have a quiet period from them, is it? Sometimes have a bit of a rest.
And also, I do think it is very deliberate that they didn't say or release anything really in the last couple of weeks, because these things had been in the diary for so long. The King's tour and William's homelessness project, and I just think that there's been the optics are so bad, where there's been a couple of announcements that have coincided with things like Kate's, finishing up her chemotherapy video. I think there was an announcement that day from the Sussexes, and things like that. The optics just, even if it is not deliberate from them that they've been released at the same time, the optics are that it's quite petty.
Well,
I think they.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I think it would be, they would have known these things were coming up. They've been really well publicised, and I think they would just say, with Earthshot, everything else happening, let's just stay quiet for a few weeks.
And the paperback version of Spare has come out, hasn't it, during this last couple of weeks? Normally, you would have added in a couple of sensational headline-grabbing stories into the paperback version of a book. He would have done more TV work and more promotional work. Didn't do that this time. So, again, that's an indication that they are reining back a bit, and he's probably realised that he's not going to build any bridges unless he sort of, cools it down a bit. So I think that was quite interesting, because normally you would try and get some publicity with the paperback.
So in many ways, Phil, by not doing anything the last couple of weeks, that's an olive branch. No, I'm not doing the olive branch thing again. I'm so tired of
Harry giving his olive branch, not the other way around.
One per show, Matt. Only one olive branch reference.
Yeah.
Honestly, one very important person at the Palace told me, said that there are not many branches left on this olive tree, and I hate using the phrase olive branch. I'm going to ban it from all broadcasts.
Make
and
some wine with
newspapers.
it.
One thing I want to talk about finally on Prince Harry is it's a royal exclusive for royal exclusive. We know that they have bought property in Portugal, and that there was maybe debate or argument that perhaps they were using it they might want to live there. My understanding is that this property, whether it's been built yet or not, whether it's off plan or whatever, this thing that they've bought, they're going to use to invest their money, and that they are investing money into things like businesses and possibly other property. Now, their Netflix deal is coming to an end soon. Is this a sensible way for the Sussexes to consolidate the money that they've earned over the years? What message do you think this sends out, that this property in Portugal is not for them to escape to into Europe, not to use as a base, but they're using it as a property investment to keep their millions? What do you think?
I think it speaks to the fact that it has been probably not the post-royal career that they had thought financially, because a lot of, their Spotify deal was ended. I think that was last year. The Netflix deal is coming to an end, and I don't think they've produced as much as they would have thought they were going to. And they do have to have another plan. I mean, at the end of the day, there has been so much speculation and conversation over the last couple of years after they had done the Harry and Meghan series and talked about the royals a lot, and that felt like it was kind of done. What next? And I think property is a great investment. So it makes sense that they've probably had the same thought. What next? What else can we do? And it is a solid investment. So it seems like they are turning their attention to other avenues of, earning money.
Well, I think property is a good investment. I'm sure you're right, Matt. You've got very good sources on these things. I'd be surprised if they never used it at all. It's close to Eugenie and Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank, who they get on very well with. A lot of Americans moving to that area near Lisbon. Seems to be becoming the trendy place to go. I think there are tax breaks for actually going there. But so I'd be surprised if they didn't use it at all. But maybe, as you say, it might be a good investment, and that's it. But it certainly would be a good European base, because I don't think Meghan wants to come back to the UK. And so, if they do want to come to Europe for any period of time, that would be a good leaping off point.
It also, and it puts Harry in a position where he can actually stay for a longer period close to England. So when he comes back, he's been back like 4 times.
But why not just buy somewhere in the UK?
It can be both. They could use it once, twice a year and still a good investment. But
why not just buy somewhere in the UK? They haven't bought anywhere in the UK. They bought somewhere in Portugal to kind of put their money. If they were insisting on having a base in Europe or an escape plan for one of them, or somewhere to spend their time, why not just buy somewhere in London?
I don't think they want to spend any time in the UK. That's the problem.
I cannot see Meghan wanting to
make
any permanent base here.
No.
I can't even really see her coming back at any point for anything.
I can't.
Let alone owning property here. So maybe Portugal's as close as she feels comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Right, we have some quick fire questions to wrap up the show, so I hope you're ready. We did a lot on documentaries in this episode because there's been a lot. So which royal documentary would you most like to see and why?
You're looking at me.
Who wants to go?
I'd like to see. I'll go first. Now. I'd like to see a fly-on-the-wall documentary, a la the Kardashians, of Prince Andrew and Fergie at home. I mean, it would either be the world's most boring programme or it could be sensational. I mean, actually, I wouldn't put them past doing it, to be honest, in years to come if they're desperate for cash. Why not? If they get thrown out of Royal Lodge.
I almost want to change my answer to that one now.
Follow them around and see what happens. You know, so watch him playing golf and, you know.
I want to hear Fergie. Yeah, I want to see Fergie behind closed doors and hear what she's chatting about.
See what happens.
I think for me, we talk about her so much, but we don't know that much about the Princess of Wales. Actually, you know, we know exactly what she's delivered. I would love to see a very similar style thing to what William's doing, but with her early years work. So over the course of a year, I would love to see that from her because we would actually learn more about the woman herself. And it's not a criticism that we don't know more. I think she's had a really tough year and she's a parent and she's got, you know, her own privacy. But I myself, I just want to know more about her. I find her really interesting.
You put your finger up there, Bronte, because, you know, is there a danger of losing a bit of the mystique of the royals if they do too many of these shows? You know, if we see too much of them,
well, probably, but that's their problem. I want to know.
Just other celebrities, and we really sort of, you know, oh well, we know all that. You know, it's good to not know some things about them.
Yeah.
Well, that's why these two documentaries with the Queen and William that are coming out this week are so good because they're about their working life and they're about what journalists see and what they're going to do behind the scenes while they're working. It's not William's at Windsor Castle in some parts of this documentary, and Camilla is in Clarence House, being filmed in Clarence House. But it's them working. It's not the Harry and Meghan 6-part Netflix series. No. But they're both great answers. I think I think more people would. Actually, God, I don't know.
I don't know.
If there's any TV executives watching, then we've got some great ideas for you anyway.
Yeah.
The King and Queen's Australia tour. Just very briefly, what do you think went right? Because we talked about it being a success. What do you think went right on that tour?
I think they pretty effectively tested the theory of how strong republicanism was in Australia, and I think they've come out on top. I think that it just does not have the momentum right now at all. And I think the second part is that, you know, that last day when they were at Sydney Opera House, that iconic royal positioning of the photos and thousands of people turning up, I think that went really well and great photos, and it just finished that part of the tour on such a high.
It must have been a little bit funny for him, a little bit strange, you know, when cast your mind back to that first trip with Diana in the early 80s, when the crowds were even bigger, you know. It must be a little bit strange for him sometimes when he thinks back on what's actually happened. But no, it went really well. And as I said earlier, you know, I think it went as well as expected the whole trip. Obviously, it'd be nice if he could have gone to, I only went to Sydney and Canberra, didn't they? It'd be nice to, you know, to go back and maybe go to some other parts of Australia and then perhaps on to New Zealand if he's well enough. But I think we're going to see Canada first and around the Caribbean.
In a word, did anything go wrong?
Lydia.
Lydia.
Is that my one word?
Lydia, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're bound to get a protest. I mean, we all had protests. I mean, in the 70s, I think the Queen and Prince Philip, they were had a Maori protest, didn't they? And they chucked a load of eggs at them, hit the windscreen of the car, and Prince Philip got out and wiped off with his handkerchief, and they carried on. So, you know, these aren't new protests, but as long as they're sort of shouting and not anything else, then you know, people can put up with them.
And finally, maybe you touched on it earlier, but I want to get an answer from both of you. Which country would you like to see the King and Queen visit next?
Well, I'd love them to go to the States, as I said earlier. I think that would be sensational, especially if Trump's in power. That would be so, because obviously he was an absolutely massive fan of the Queen and, you know, insisted on having a state visit. And loved being at Buckingham Palace and, you know, adored talking to her and everything else. So, and I think he genuinely gets on well with Charles, you know. I mean, I think Charles gets on very well with Joe Biden, but obviously he's going to be off the scene. So whoever is president, I think that's going to be fascinating. I'd like to see him go to the States.
Sorry, I have to take his answer. That's a really good one. With the election happening...
You can't have the same answer. That's against the rules.
Well, then Canada. I like it when they do Canadian.
On the same trip, go from one to the other.
Yes,
yeah,
perfect.
Right,
yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll have a busy year next year. We'll talk about the tours. Thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Right, well, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy the show, please let us know in the comments. We do read them. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode.